Okay, so from last week, what is the structural, let's say, definition of a dendrite? And we still have some work to do from last chapter. Let's not forget. Okay, well, if we know, let's make sure we get it done. Okay, so it receives information. What's the opposite of a dendrite? The axon sends the information away. That is correct, okay? The functional unit of the nervous system is what? The basic nerve cell is called a what? No, not what they do. Basic nerve cell is a neuron, okay? And let's see here. We have two divisions of the central nervous system. What are they? Okay, the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. How do we keep them separate? In other words, this one right here, right? Okay, it's because it is also a portion of the brainstem, which we'll get into next chapter, that controls smooth muscle contraction. So what might be an example of where smooth muscle is located? In your intestines, in arteries, veins, glandular tissues. All those are smooth muscles because we have no conscious control over those. Okay, so cardiac is pretty self-explanatory, but skeletal muscles, on the other hand, are controlled by the somatic nervous system. Okay, and what we have is, let's say, an afferent and an efferent pathway. And what that means, okay, is whether you step on something sharp, grab something that's hot, any one of those will send a signal through the afferent pathway to the brain and then sends in another signal back through the efferent to have an effect. That should be maybe we need to go That's correct. Yep. Because you do not have to consciously think about that. Okay? So either that or your somatic nervous system could be, the example we gave is, let's say if any one of you is line judging in volleyball, or myself, for instance, and the ball is being rolled to yourself, okay? So you need to line your leg up with where the ball is rolling so that when it hits the bottom of your foot, it rolls straight up to you. Like I said, I was never very good at that. It might hit one side of my foot or the other and then bounces left or right. So that would be controlled by your somatic nervous system. You visually see input coming in, and then your brain decides, oh, I need to move left or move right, and line the ball up with your foot and let it pop up to you so you don't have to bend over. Okay, so again, that's going through your somatic nervous system. This, we don't have to worry about this at night. Okay, it constantly tells your diaphragm to keep contracting so you breathe, and it controls your heart rate then as well. Okay. So we had said there's some really long-term cells, or the names of cells. As you can see, here's one of them. Okay. Now, what happens is the human body does have a pretty good, let's say, what's the word I'm looking for? I should say it does a pretty good job of taking care of itself as long as you keep it well hydrated with water, supply yourself with the proper nutrients, and get the proper amount of rest. That's a lot of what it takes to being healthy, staying healthy. And should some materials get into our body, well, we've got a line of defense, even inside of our nervous system. Okay? One of the, let's say, disorders that is really dangerous to get is what we call meningitis. Okay? And there are different categories of that. And this is something that these microglial cells would possibly help keep you from getting, is meningitis. I think it was in Texas. There was a young teenager who he was swimming in the water and some form of bacteria got inside of his body and got his cranial cavity, and he died from an infection in the brain. That's really, really rare, and really these types of cells, if they're doing their job, we'll clean up after that debris. But again, this is probably an isolated case. I have to look at to see what it is. I happened to notice that on the news, national news this morning. Maybe it was even last night. I'm not quite sure. Okay. So last week we talked about an electrical short. Okay. And what this does is found in between, they provide insulating layers of myelin around areas of the brain and spinal cord. And what we meant insulating layers is wrapped around power cords. Oops. Need to do that. And around these power cords provides insulation that prevents an electrical short. And that's what these oligodendrocytes do in the central nervous system. In other words, the brain and the spinal cord. Then it's a different types of cells. I believe they're called Schwann cells in the peripheral nervous system. Schwann cells. Okay. In the fall of the year, what is it that we would, let's say, as trees are growing, what are you going to do to shrubs, bushes, and trees this time of year? Starts with the letter P. When you remove branches that really don't need to be there. It's not trimming, it's pruning. So I believe that would be the proper term. But when you prune them, what you're allowing is for unhealthy branches to be removed, and then more nutrients can be sent to the healthy parts of the plant. Okay? I believe that's the proper terminology, is pruning, and the brain develops the same way. And that's something that we'll be looking at here shortly. Is what happens is, for me, uh, the best way that I like to describe this process, we'll come back to this, okay? And what I mean is, let's say you're going from this side of the building, you're walking towards the east side, okay? And as we all know, if you're going down to the main office, there's a T intersection right there. It doesn't even have to be there. It can be this coach's hallway. But as you're walking this way, you see something out of the corner of your eye. Typically, that is, you just look that direction as a reaction. But also, some people, you just don't even pay any attention. Okay? So, if someone's walking towards you walking towards the principal's office, and you're walking in that direction, some people, again, they turn because they see a stimulus. They just want to see what it is. But some people choose not to do that, so then that reaction then is suppressed. Okay? In other words, what happens is you may turn that direction because you want to. Typically, the brain has to decipher at a very young age, maybe 3 months to 6 months. What happens is then infants decide, well, I'm going to do something because I want to, not because of something, some sort of external stimuli, whether it's something they see, something they hear, because you then can suppress that reaction, that you can look a certain way because you want to, not because of something stimulated to. Yes?
So is that like when they start being around like 4 or whatever, and they start, when they hear something, they start to like look that way? Is that what that is?
Yep. And we'll see an example of that because tomorrow we want to do a brief overview of what the SNS and ANS are. We went through the supportive cells, and then what we're going to be doing is eventually we're going to get to the synapse, and we'll be doing that later on this week. So what I wanted to do then is the best way to see how this happens is through this explanation. So we will pick up with this later on tomorrow, and notice we got a short week. So with that, we'll turn it over to the Discovery Channel here, and that'll take us to the rest of the hour. Then we can also do journal entries here. Okay. Those in. So here we go. Okay, so the structural categories that what we see here. This is a neuron. Okay, notice that it's sending an impulse away from it. So this structural category then is called a what? Okay, this is a neuron right here, and this is a structural category that sends Notice how those axons split when they get closer to become a dendrite.
Once triggered, they start converting fat to generate heat. So Robert is able to maintain his core body temperature. It'll take a year for the fat cells to run out of fuel. But by that time, he'll be better insulated.
process of developing, how does the signal know what track to follow is what I'm saying. How does it become more efficient? What did they show you in the video? The tracks that are most successful or the most efficient, what does myelin have to do with that? They become, yeah, right. And the strongest connections get the most myelin, makes them more efficient. Okay? So what happens is if a signal from one nerve tract to another is not used, what did the video illustrate? The connection is severed. Is that bad? It finds another connection that's more efficient. Okay? What it was illustrating is one, I think they use the term tendril connection. Okay? And what that means is if it's not very efficient, it cuts from one track and moves to another. Okay? And what happens is they said Robert, from this point on, will look at something because he what? Because he wants to. Again, that's one of them aspects when you're walking down the hallway, sometimes you don't turn because you're really not curious enough, or you just don't want to. You don't care, you just press that connection. That's different from how we call the forgiveness, just the idea that otherwise you turn and look at everything that catches your eye. I think for the most part that's still a very primitive, if you want to call it that, very primitive response, but sometimes even in athletics, where there's football, wrestling, basketball, any one of those, I sometimes think is one of those, you're officiating underneath the hoop, and it happens throughout the course of, let's say, a varsity basketball game. You hear the coaches yelling, you have the officials, well, not yelling, but discussing. How could you not see that? It was right in front of you. Well, you're possibly trained to be looking at a certain spot rather than trying to see the entire court at the same time. Sometimes it's something might catch your eye, you turn and look at it, but maybe it's too late. Okay? But regardless, we will continue with this tomorrow.